blessed with a very beautiful, wonderful family. My mom is from Costa Rica, and my dad is from, hillbilly West Virginia. So a very weird kind of combination of family experiences on two sides of my family. But it was beautiful, and I grew up in a very good family. So I'd say part of the priesthood and a vocation like the one that I'm pursuing, I think requires a great virtue of generosity. It requires one to be deeply understanding of what it means to give of one's life. And my father, in my younger years, really demonstrated that to me. He, not only just materially, he was very generous to us. Like, I remember our Christmases were always very, fun and exciting. Not because of all the presents necessarily, although it definitely was at times. It was also just because he would make it wonderful. He wanted to make it a magical day and, make us feel special, make us feel wanted in the family. And that was his generosity of time, his effort, everything that he has and did in my life was for us, for his kids. And so generosity, that generosity my dad demonstrated to me when I was a kid, definitely had a big impact.
I'm Peter Foley. I'm from not here. I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska. I guess one big thing to kind of jump on the bandwagon from these guys, serving Mass was a big thing for me. My parents did a good job of both encouraging me to do that, but also not forcing me to, so I hated it. So they played that well, and it worked out. But another big thing that I think really helped me was just a constant presence of prayer in my house. So whether it's before meals or kind of insisting on a family rosary when it got really busy, still making sure that happened. And then especially prayer right before going to bed with my parents. Even if it was really short, just kind of making that a constant habit was really helpful for establishing prayer life kind of from a young age. So, yeah.
Great. So I'm McDade. I did youth ministry at St. Mark in Vienna for many years. I'm connected with the Youth Apostles community as well, so I like the youth ministry aspects. I had a couple of things to say. They're kind of small, but I will say my parents are both teachers, so they had me well conditioned. So simple things like we got donuts after Mass. We always made it to Mass, but when you're 5 years old and your attention span is struggling, you kind of know at the end of that yellow brick road you have a donut. That was very helpful for me. It's kind of an obvious, getting to Mass and having the prayer life, that's good. I know for me, there's subtle things going on where my mom's mother would have us over on Sunday evenings pretty frequently for a relaxed dinner. That's a subtle thing, but I know when I put my seminary application together, they said what's important about Sundays, and I thought this isn't the answer they want, but by golly, doing those dinners on Sunday night was really, really important. That's not connected to we went to Mass in the morning, but those dinners were very helpful. It was great, very restorative, getting together with family in that kind of way. So maybe that's family, that's friends. I'm very lucky in that I probably have 20 or 30 cousins within 15 minutes drive. So I think I'm a little bit very lucky and blessed there. Another smaller thing, and I'm going to spit it out because I might not get another chance to talk. But I took an elective class where they asked you to think about different pieces in formation, and one thing that struck me, when I got my first Eucharist, I got 2 children's Bibles because I had all kinds of aunts and uncles. And one children's Bible was fine. It's still at my parents' house, but I never really opened it. The other children's Bible had good pictures. I liked it. And when I was 5, 6, and 7 years old and struggled during Mass, I would leaf through that thing. And that's still in my room. I'm hoping to give that to my godson at some point. That children's Bible, the fact that I liked it. So that's a subtle decision where I say if you see your kid looking through just different children's Bibles, and the one costs $30 and the kid loves it and the other costs $25, I would put the $5 into the one that the kid likes. my mom's a reading instructor, so I was going to be, reading. And I was going, I mean, I liked it, but there wasn't much room for deviation.
Best for last. So there's a lot of like good stuff that my parents did. I think I'm Sean. Yes, I'm Sean. I said best for last, but that's. I'm from Newport News, Virginia originally. I'm part of the Apostles community, so I live in McLean. Thanks for reminding. The one thing that came to mind, I think, the example of my dad's own dedication to prayer. I think fathers always play a very crucial role in prayer life, in their example. But the one big thing that came to mind was his dedication to serving his family. I remember as a kid there was a certain point where I had to be told that my dad didn't have summers off, like we did in school. I just thought he did because we would go on vacation to this place, or he'd go to the neighborhood pool with us. And I was in Scouts too, I guess that's the theme. And he would, go to summer camp with us. He spent so much time with us when I was really little, I didn't realize that he still had to work in the summers when I was, off from school. And that was a helpful moment for me, realizing the self-sacrificial element to both the priesthood and natural fatherhood. Realizing that when a parent goes to work and they come home, they don't just get to say, okay, I'm home now, I'm done. Like, you're never done. It's actually harder work at home, probably. And that was really inspirational for me in discerning the priesthood and in continuing information, realizing that, your life isn't your own, no matter what kind of father you are.
So this will be our last question for you guys before we break into the smaller groups. So as you're studying in seminary and you have all these relationships that you mentioned with your families, and you're seeing the challenges in the world, like anxiety or people on their phones too much, sort of secularism, knowing what you know now from this vantage point, what would be like the piece of advice or a challenge maybe that we don't see as parents that we could take away, kind of knowing what would be nurturing to a strong vocation from parents that have small children, even if it's, married life, religious life, consecrated, single. Anybody, I'll just open that up. You guys can dive in.
Popcorn this one?
Yeah.
You start, we go on. We like order.
We do. Yeah, it's hard to argue with that one. The thing that came to me, initially what I was going to say was just definitely put a strong emphasis on keeping the Sabbath day holy. That's one of the commandments for a reason. Mass was a consistent thing. Spending maybe a little extra time in prayer this Sunday, but I was definitely one of those guys who's like, okay, it's, Sunday afternoon, I can do homework now. Sometimes it's a necessity, sometimes, but, making that effort to have real family time there. But the thing I guess I wanted to emphasize more specifically, what's something to do with that time, is to take an active role in teaching the faith. Obviously, priests, you and your pastor, like Father Kevin, we do that professionally, to borrow Gabe's phrase. But something like, if you have like a book of the lives of the saints, I know they have illustrated children's ones of those, or like the Baltimore Catechism, I think is what it's called. Yeah, set aside an hour, half hour on Sunday afternoon, because a vocation, again, any vocation, I said was about service. It's also about love of God, love of neighbor, love of self. And you can't love what you don't know. So you have to teach the faith.
Mine comes in the way of a little bit of negative advice, what not to do. So there are, in my humble opinion, there are two things that you shouldn't do when your son or daughter expresses interest in a vocation. One is worse than the other. I'll start with the not so bad one. I don't want you doing that and being like very, very opposed. This actually isn't that bad. There, obviously, I don't think any of you will do that just by virtue that you're here. But it's a little startling, like, just the first thought is like, oh, I'm not gonna have grandkids. Or at least that would be my first thought. The other one is, like getting t-shirts made that say, proud parent of a future Catholic priest. Like, just don't be weird. Because then, son or daughter goes, oh, am I doing this out of the right reasons, or am I doing this because mommy wants it for me? So like, yeah, those are the two things kind of like not to do.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that freedom component is really important for someone to opt in to the way of Christ. To follow in Christ's footsteps, you have to be able to be the one that chooses to go on that path. And if there's anything that you do that's jeopardizing that possibility, I think, absolutely, I think that's true. My advice, based on my perspective now, what I've learned in the time of being a seminarian, is definitely to actually, I'm going to popcorn to someone right now because I haven't fully formulated what I want to say. So, are one of you three?
So Aaron had mentioned like secularism kind of as like one of the big problems in teaching the faith in general, but also nourishing vocations. And another thing that kind of stuck out to me that I noticed when kind of going back through my story of how I served in seminary was like when I would ask to do something that like it was pretty clear now that I shouldn't have been doing, like watching a movie that was just had no good moral content to it, or something along those lines. When my parents were telling me no, I would always be like, why? Everyone else is doing it. That was always my argument, was that everyone of my friends are doing it. And their response was always the same. They would always say, well, our family's different. And that really stuck with me. Like, there's something different about like being a Catholic than the rest of this age. And that was a big thing when I was like finally making that jump to like, okay, I think I can actually do this. I was like, yeah, I'm different than this age, and I can actually do this. And that was kind of formed in me at a very young age by that too. So.
I'm gonna jump in now. I was originally gonna say something that was not as good as what Ben inspired me to say instead. So I'm gonna say this instead. Ben said, "You can't love what you don't know," and I think that's really wise. I think that it's very difficult for vocations to come, and that means also married vocations as well, to come from people who don't know good married people or good priests or religious. And so how can you discern something that you don't know anyone who's doing it joyfully and fulfillingly? So if you want the possibility for your children to be open to what God might be calling them to, bring them around people who are living their vocation beautifully. Right? Invite a good priest over, invite some sisters over for dinner, something like that. Let them be around people who are living beautiful vocations. And that way they can know and then come to love that which God is wanting them to do. That's what I'm saying.
My answer might come off a little peculiar, and I want to make sure I get the balance on it correctly. But I'll say it. When I was a youth minister, I was working with high school guys, and I honestly kind of thought most of the time if you could get a dozen high school guys talking to each other about the faith, you're scoring some real points. That's not particularly easy to do. Particularly if you're doing it in a way where it's a good discussion, where it's not just, well, there's 10 commandments, we've numbered them 1 to 10, what's your question, right? Like you can do that in a way that's very flat. You also don't want it in a way where like, yeah, popsicles and ice cream and no bedtime, right? Like you want it to be circumscribed. But figuring out how we can have conversations with our family about the faith that are comfortable, that don't feel, comfortable probably is the best word. You don't want to schedule it, but like, is there a way to talk about the faith with the family where everyone kind of enjoys that, where you feel comfortable being a little bit vulnerable, you know, knowing that I can grow in this way? I feel like in any religious vocation, we need to kind of talk about our faith in a way that is discursive and goes back and forth. And that's a subtle skill that I think doesn't always get looked at that closely. So like being able to talk about your faith in a discursive way that sets things back and forth and is open for adjustment and growth, that's pretty helpful.
I think all the talking is really great, but I'm going to talk about silence. I think it's very important to, like they were saying, you know, to allow your children to form relationships with other adults in their lives that are good influences. That's a big principle we talk about in youth ministry, is making sure that, you know, a young person has adults in their life that are not their parents, but at a certain point, what your parents says doesn't matter to you. It doesn't matter. But what I would say is, along with that, cultivate a life that includes silence and prayer. I think, especially when we're younger, we learn a lot of rote prayers, and we learn, you know, we're at the Mass, or, you know, we pray the Rosary, but I don't think growing up I really knew what adoration was. I think we did it once or twice in high school. But I didn't learn that from my parents, and I wish I had, is to learn how to spend time in quiet prayer and learning how to listen. And I think the younger you are, the harder it is to just sit there and listen to learn that prayer, but at least to be there and not have any kind of materials to work with, but just to be with the Lord. Because that was something that was very instrumental in hearing the call the 10th time it came in application, and actually saying yes to it, because I was used to that silence. It was very important.
So we have a little bit of time for a couple questions.
What role, if any, did education play in your vocation? Whether that's a focus group at a university, attending a Catholic college, homeschooling, Catholic school?
I would say, so just for reference, I went to Catholic school from preschool to 5th grade, and then public school from then on. Now I go to a Catholic school again.
Ostensibly.
Pretty good
Yeah.
information. But I think the one thing that I'm a big fan of now is seeing a lot of homeschool families. Is homeschooling is a really good idea. I just think, you know, I didn't get a lot of, you know, detrimental influence when I was in school, you know, but I didn't have any good influence there. Where that really came was from the youth ministry that I was a part of in high school. And then because going to that kind of cultivated an attitude or a disposition that was like, okay, I'm open to this whole Catholic thing. I'll go see what campus ministry is like in college. And then that was really where it became my own. But looking back, I think it's really important to have, and we can't all do homeschooling or even a Catholic school, but to really have some kind of educational component where you're really being formed well. Like a lot of the guys were saying, having those other adults in your life, that's part of it, is having someone in your life that is giving you that good example and good, very like explicit about teaching the faith in very concrete ways.
I think we'll hold it at that just so we can get through discussion time and relieve all the people that are taking care of